Hello, my students of critical thinking. In this video, we're going to discuss some definitions of critical thinking as a subject of study and their importance. So we like to get right into it first by looking at a quote from one very popular French philosopher. We look at the Latinic version first. He says, cogito ergo sum, later translated into French that je pense donc je suis, and right into English, I think, therefore I am. Rene Descartes. What do we take from this saying? Our ability to think already suggests that we exist. So if we do not use our mental faculty, then maybe we do not exist. That's just a joke though, but it's very important for all of us to use our mental faculty. So we can accurately say, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, one of the things most people fear to engage in is solid, hard thinking. Of course, our mental faculty is a gift to us, isn't it? So it is important for us to use it to be able to solve problems, come head on with them, and overcome them in life, to make life easier for us. So the ability to think is a gift that we do not have to take for granted, but actually use it very well. Adolf Hitler says the great masses of people will more easily fall victims to a big lie than to a small one. Of course, none of us wants to fall victim to even a small lie, how much more a big one. That calls on us to be able to use our mental faculties to analyze things very well before we draw conclusions, or else we may fall victims not only to small lies, but to big ones. So let's get right into some definitions of critical thinking and see what we can deduce from them. One of them says critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. Now we look at this very important words, intellectually. It means it has to do with thinking. It's discipline. It's not something done just like that. It follows a process. And it is an active discipline. It involves skill. We have to conceptualize things in our mind. We have to apply whatever we have come to as a conclusion. We analyze things. We bring things together, putting two and two together. And we evaluate things, examine them. We observe, we experience, we reflect, think deeply. We reason, put two and two together. And at the end of the day, we communicate with people what we have come to understand as the finality of the thinking process. So critical thinking, no doubt, is very much involving. Then Michael Scriven and Richard Paul say, for example, in its exemplary form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions. So we end up having clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reasons, depth, breadth, and fairness. So critical thinking is not limited to one particular individual or a few group of people, but is a universal thing, because 1 plus 1 is not only one in Ghana or Liberia or Nigeria or in America. 1 plus 1 is 2 in every part of the globe, isn't it? So critical thinking is a universal thing, not just something that belongs to a group of people. So the ability to think critically involves three things, namely an attitude. An attitude becomes part of our everyday lives. It is easy to tell someone's attitude by observation. So an attitude of being disposed to consider in a thoughtful way the problems and subjects that come within the range of one's experiences. So it becomes part of our lives. So a critical thinker yesterday is a critical thinker today, and of course, a critical thinker tomorrow. And then we have knowledge of the methods of logical inquiry and reasoning. So we have to have the knowledge of the methods. Methods matter. How we think, the processes we follow matter. Thinking is not done just anyhow. It has to follow a particular process. That is important. And then some skill in applying those methods. We need skill to be able to apply the method. So small footballers, for example, who are more skillful are able to take on defenders and score goals. Those less skillful are not that productive as the more skillful ones. Edward Glaser says those things. Then critical thinking is, in short, self-directed, self-disciplined, self-monitored, self-corrective thinking. So this one is all about self. Even though critical thinking is a universal process, it begins with individuals. So we have to be self-directed, self-disciplined, to monitor self, to correct self, to be able to think critically. It presupposes accent to rigorous standards of excellence, and with also effective communication and problem-solving abilities. So if we think critically, then we become solutions to everyday problems to make life easier for all of us. Then if that's the case, why do we need to think critically? Of course, everybody thinks, but much of our thinking left to itself is biased, distorted, partial, uninformed, or downright prejudice. Most of our experiences are from a very narrow point of view. And of course, everybody thinks. But if the thinking is not directed, it's actually going to be downright prejudice. And of course, biased. Isn't it true that, for example, you are able to say good things about your friends, those you like, and very bad things about those you do not like? But the ability to think critically means whether you dislike someone or not, you'll be able to tell the reality about them. Just for example. So it should go without biases or prejudice. It should be informed type of thinking. So of course, everybody thinks, but we have to make sure our thinking processes are well directed. So yet the quality of our life and that of what we produce depends precisely on the quality of our thoughts. Shoddy thinking is costly both in money and in quality of life. So our ability to think well transcends into our lives. So a poor thinker, no doubt, will have a poor life. But the ability to put two and two together, to reason, to articulate thought for ourselves and come to good conclusions can contribute to our well-being. The opposite is equally true. If we think poorly, we take bad decisions that end up affecting our very own lives and the lives of those around us. So excellence in thought, however, must be systematically cultivated, should follow a system. So a well-cultivated critical thinker does what? Raises vital questions about life and its many facets and problems, formulating them clearly and precisely. So the ability to ask questions is important. Identify problems is important, but these questions must be formed clearly and precisely so that the answers to them would also be very clear. If the question itself about the very problems in life are not clear, there is no doubt we're going to be able to successfully address the problems. And then that critical thinker gathers and assesses relevant information using abstract ideas to interpret it effectively. He or she comes to well-reasoned conclusions and solutions, and testing them against relevant criteria and standards. So we gather information and we use abstract ideas to interpret it effectively, and then we come to conclusion that must be well thought out. And then after the conclusions, we even have to test them to be able to testify that these conclusions are final and there is nothing wrong with them. If there is something wrong with them, we correct them and come to a final conclusion. So that critical thinker also thinks open-mindedly within alternative systems of thought, recognizing and assessing as need be their assumptions, implications, and practical consequences. So whatever thinking process we engage in, the final product is what our mind should be on. What are going to be the practical consequences of our thinking processes? If the end product is good, then no doubt our processes would justify that. If the end product is not good, then we will have to readjust our thinking processes and follow a well thought out plan to be able to come to a good conclusion. And then, of course, after we come to very good conclusions, then we're able to communicate effectively with others in figuring out solutions to complex problems. By looking at just these definitions of critical thinking, we can no doubt see that this is a very complex process that will have to take time to be able to take each part out very well, master these processes, and then form an attitude of thinking about things very critically before we come to conclusions. If we do that, we'll be able to become very good critical thinkers in society and be able to contribute our quota to society by solving problems. So we can actually successfully say that cogito ergo sum. I am, therefore I think, therefore I am. Je pense, donc je suis. So we'll be able to successfully face the fact that thinking is a very important thing in our very lives. In the next session, we're going to look at the difference between facts and opinion. Stay tuned.